So here's in my bedroom. This is like a little shelf or a little table here. This is the bottom part of it, and there's the bag on the floor. So all this twack or this projected noise I saw with my eyes unaided. It wasn't quite as saturated as this, but I did see all this, and it appeared all over the room. And so I don't know for sure if it's in my eyes or if it's in the lens of the camera. Um, uh, and in the lens of the camera, or if it's actually on the surface of these objects. I believe it's both, and I also believe it's in between, because you can see sometimes when I pan with the camera, some of the imagery appears to move. Like you can see there, some of the almost looks like it has a filter on it. There is no filter on it. And some of the noise doesn't move with the camera. So that shows that it's in perhaps three-dimensional space, or that it's in my eyes and on the surface that I'm looking in. But I also believe it's in the air in between. I'm going to zoom in on just a small part of the picture here. This is one of the patterns that I saw quite often, where it kind of reminds me, it kind of looks like to me like illustrations of people dancing, like cartoon people, and like they're swinging each other around, and they're swinging each other around, and it turns into like a pattern here that I saw quite often. That's how I interpreted it. I'm going to zoom in on another part here. Just sometimes when I zoom in, like I see an area and I'm like, ooh, that looks good, and then I'm like, oh, when you zoom out on it, you don't see it. Zoom in. So that's also true of a lot of my photos. Sometimes the thumbnails look like they show more patterns or more shapes, more of a secret image, or more of an easy to interpret image of the holograms or the projections. And quite often in the water bottle and in glasses with like liquid in them, or even without liquid in them, it would seem to show sometimes the imagery more. And you can make out, I think there's so many overlapping images that you can interpret it many ways. I also think it's been intentionally made to be able to be interpreted many ways, both by the targeted individuals or the victims, and but also to be seen by others as, oh, that's just like looking at clouds in the sky and interpreting them in different ways. I've also been worried about there is a disorder where people do see patterns in things, and then they can't get their brain to stop seeing patterns in things, and not in like a mathematician sort of way, but in sort of like our facial recognition and our eye and pattern recognition functions that are built into our brains. I sometimes have worried, like, if this ever ends, if I survive this, will I continue to see things like this, even in things that don't have this sort of thing going on? Will I continue to see it? So I think here's a good representation of where there's like a lot of imagery here that I don't think you can brush off as anything. But even if you do brush it off as it's not, like, they're not creatures, they're not people, there's no faces in there, or anything like that, I think it's still very important to know that I saw all this with my eyes unaided, without the use of a camera. It wasn't quite as saturated as this, although sometimes it is. I still saw all this, and so I still think it's very important to look at it, to see if you can make anything out of it, but not take too long, because it's proof that this bullshit was going on, and that I don't suffer from 24/7 daily psychoses every day of the fucking year. I think that this was used to provide cover for SWAT teams, to provide camouflage or act as a cloaking mechanism for the drones, but it also adds as a cloak or cover for SWAT team, or for potential victims or victims during a hostage or crisis scenario. And it could also be used to confuse the bad people, although they're using this against good people, and they became bad people themselves. That's sort of a best case scenario, because these things are so advanced and can, shock certain types of your body to get them to move. I've never been someone that would ever think to use the term mind control or body control, and that's literally what they are. They can manipulate the mind so much and manipulate the body so much, even at a subtle or subliminal sense, that it kind of leads one easily to think that these were created intentionally for that purpose and to be used on civilians and as sort of practice for using them on other people, like people in political positions and people in high-ranking positions or key positions in companies that would be and organizations that would be very important to manipulate for the purposes of, whatever. And and I sometimes lean towards that, but again, I don't really care because it doesn't matter. It's not my job to find out, to constantly think, why would they be doing this and blah blah blah. That's not really important to me. What's important to me is that I'm suffering, my dog is suffering, there are other people suffering, and there are other people that, like, years of their life have been wasted, and their lives have been perhaps ruined because these people go around having fun with it. And I'm sure they take great joy in that, and they're beyond the point of where this would be used on key individuals. So, and they're still using it on us, which then leads one to think, well, why are they still bothering me with it? Why don't they just stop and just leave me alone and then cover it up? And what the terrorists or gang stalkers have said to me is that they've made me a training ground, so that they'll train other people that want to get on these to use them on other people, like key individuals, that they'll use them on me so that I'll suffer forever until I kill myself. And then they've said, well, the way to kill himself is to get his dog killed. And then they do things like push Max into traffic, and then my sister or my dad sees that, or they don't see that, and then they don't think, they were warned that they were going to target Max, and then they started shocking Max like a motherfucker. Max was running around yelping and whimpering and whining, and then as if something was shocking him, as if like a bunch of fire ants had gotten on him, which they hadn't, and then they pushed him into traffic, which he doesn't, he wouldn't normally run off the job site when he has a toy right there and when he has his owner, me, right there, and they do nothing.